Hi, I'm Win Blodgett, President of Holland Pump Company. Welcome to our webinar on conversations with electric submersible pump veterans and common questions about electric submersible pumps. I'd like to thank our Director of Marketing, Amy Fletcher, for facilitating this event and for the first, a little background. Holland Pump acquired pump service and supply of Troy in 2021. For over 30 years, Pump Service and Supply built a reputation for innovative pump solutions and for permanent pump installations, and especially for their ability to repair many brands of electric submersible pumps. Their primary lines are Homa and Surumi. Today, I'm joined by co-founder Tom Iwanowitz. Welcome, Tom.
Tom, I remember you telling me that you started with electric motors when you were about 14 years old. Can you tell us about that and how you came to be a pump man?
Of course, 14 years old, I was looking for a job, and I got my working papers. Was lucky enough to get a job in a single-phase electric motor shop. I started there, and I worked a couple hours a day after school, but I came to realize that there wasn't very many people that were doing that, and it was a trade that I felt that was needed, and there wasn't a lot of people doing it. So I kind of stuck with that. And, I was looking at the time, everybody was going to college and people were doing, other things. And I stuck with that. And then as I got out of school, I went to work for another motor shop. From there, I went back to the original shop. And then I ended up getting a job with a pump company. It was one of the older flight companies in the United States, same as Sanders. I worked for them for 15 years and I was a service manager for them. And, I realized right there that there was a niche for that. And, and then after that, around that 15 years, I left there and we started this company, Pump Service and Supply, which kind of brings us to where we are today. And I think it was a good move for me anyway.
Right. I remember speaking with you and, we were kind of discussing the idea of, being cut from the same cloth in terms of our attitude to work and to service. And one hears a lot about, how young people just want to work with computers. What do you think about the state of the trades now, and what do you think are the best opportunities for young people in the trades?
I definitely believe that a trade today, especially today, even more so than when I was growing up or younger, that a trade is really something that really should be looked at today. And there's a niche there, a thing that not everybody could do. And, I felt that if I got good at that, I'd have a life career. And that's the way that it turned out. So I would tell anybody that any trade, and the pump's a real good trade because there's not a lot of people doing it, could make a lifelong career out of it, especially with the amount of people that are in the workforce today.
Earlier in the conversation, when you first went to work, you worked for a single-phase motor shop. And just for the layman, can you kind of explain the difference between, single-phase and three-phase a little bit?
Well, single-phase is as it says, it uses one phase to neutral, and three phases, like three-phase, is an industrial power, and they're 120 degrees apart. You got 360 make a circle. That's the way a generator works. And when you look at the power on a pole, if there's three wires on the pole on the top, you have three phase there. Basically what they do is, like with a single phase shop, all your home appliances and that stuff usually runs off a single phase. But the three phase is more of an industrial commercial power. There's less moving parts and they can run a lot larger motors off of that power. For big pumps or big motors, that's really always the way to go. And so the real difference in it is that the single phase power is limited to, because when you only have one phase, more to generate for the same horsepower, you got to have, a much bigger wire. So as you get into bigger equipment, you're way better off with higher voltages and more in three phase. Yeah, three phase is the way to go on any industrial equipment that's large.
And then can you tell us about your typical use on a daily basis, both in rental applications and also on permanent installations, with your typical use of control panels?
Rental control panels are to protect the equipment. If somebody was to run over a cable or something and short circuit, they have short circuit protection, a breaker that's in that control box designed so that if it shorts out, it will trip out and of course won't burn the wire up. It also, that unit where that control box will have overloads in it on a rental pump. And those overloads are for over amperage. So let's say a pump is designed to run at 17 amps. You know, the overloads would be set at 17 amps. And if that motor for some reason draws more than that 17 amps, then it would trip that out, causing it so that it won't overload the motor. So you're set right to the amp, where if you had a 20 amp breaker, it's possible for that to draw, let's say, somewhere in between there and maybe overload a wire or overload something, cause something to burn up. And so that would stop that from doing that. The other thing with single phase, the advantage with a control box on a pump is that if it is single phase, or even if it's three phase, all those components that are in the control panel don't have to be in the pump. So there's a lot of pumps out there that have contactors in them, or start capacitors, start relays. If those are in the panel, it's much easier to service. So that's always a plus that way. So that would be the main reasons for, you know, having a control box on a pump. And of course you can shut it on and off by that box also, that control panel.
And then how for a permanent installation, what are the general differences between the types of control panels that you have for permanent installations versus rental applications?
Well, normally these panels for portable use are light, made out of plastic or fiberglass, so a man can handle them. You know, they're limited in components to what they can do. And I didn't mention, but many times we have, you know, over temperature in them, which is a set of thermal switches that are in the motor, that if the motor overheats, it will trip a relay out in the control box and shut the unit down. Now with a permanent installation, there's a lot of things that can be done. And really, you know, to kind of simplify it, I try to reduce everything to its simplest form. Even with a more complex panel, you know, a relay is nothing more than an electrical switch. And then, so one thing happens, you know, and it turns that relay, and that relay may turn either a light or turn something else on or turn something out, or maybe turn another relay on. And they can get pretty complex depending on what you're trying to do with them. But, you know, we do permanent installations where we'll do flow meters. You know, they have level controllers, and we get into, you know, 4 to 20 milliamp signals with transducers. And, you know, the main thing with those panels are, even though there can be really large and they may have 50 relays in them, but it's only because, you know, we might be running 4 pumps at the same time, and, you know, it's doing numerous jobs, and we may even be sending signals out to another location for SCADA. And so they look really massive. They look pretty scary to some people, but they're really, if you reduce them to their simplest form, they're really pretty simple. And today they use PLCs and that, and I still like to use the old relay logic because anybody can repair them. And, you know, that's really the main use of a permanent installation panel, you know, to protect the equipment, the same thing.
Right. And your permanent installations with control panels, those panels have a UL rating, right? I mean, I think, is it 698A is what you've told me?
Yeah,
can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the normal UL listing is 508. 508 is like a standard by UL for, I think it's for machine tool control panels. It's just a standard that UL says that it's built by. and that would be a standard panel. Now, a 698A panel is one of many different types of panels that could be built, is used for circuits that run into a hazardous environment. In other words, if you have float switches, a transducer, thermals, seal fail, any of those items that could be running into a wet well, and there could be methane gas in that, that panel is designed to have such a low current with the relays that's used. They're called intrinsically safe relays. Those relays are generate so little current that they cannot induce a spark that would cause an explosion.
Okay.
So
that's, is that what we mean when we say explosion proof?
Say it again. I'm sorry.
Is so when one is speaking about something being explosion proof, is that's what we're talking about?
Like I said, the circuits that come out of that panel can't be in a hazardous environment. It's a whole different class. But the circuits that come out of that panel that go into a hazardous environment, that is what that's designed for. That's 698A. So in other words, if you had a wet well that had gases in it, the circuitry that goes into that wet well is designed so it can't cause a spark. If a wire got cut or a float got broke, it couldn't induce a spark to cause an explosion. And that's approved by UL.
Okay. And then I know that you all often use transformers in rental applications. And can you tell us a bit about, how one uses transformers?
You mean in the control panel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in the most all panels we use, let's say you had 480 volt was your primary voltage coming into the panel for the pumps. You would step that down to, let's say, 110 volt, and then we would put that through a breaker, and all them control components would be run off of that. The whole control circuit would be run off of 110 volts rather than 460. And sometimes they do them in 24. We normally use 110 volt, and then with the like these intrinsically safe relays, that even reduces the voltage even more, so that there's not an issue with a hazardous environment. So that's one use of the transformer, in the control panel. And of course we have heaters. If the panel's outside, you have condensate heaters in there to keep the panel so it doesn't build up moisture on the components. So yeah, we would change the voltage for different items in the control panel.
I believe you told me that in your area in New York, there's a lot of infrastructure that's electrified, like bridges, for example, but they're at a voltage that requires you to step it down. Is that correct?
Yeah. Sometimes we step it down. Sometimes we even use buck boost transformers on it. Like we have a lot of 208 here. A lot of times that 208 may even be lower than that. And most motors are not designed to run, like say, for example, 230 volt is a pretty common design pump by most manufacturers. So if you can go minus or plus 10%. And so you're really like at 207 volts or something at a motor that's designed 230 volts. So we put a buck boost transformer in there, and if that voltage coming in is really, let's say, 207, if we put a buck boost transformer, we can boost that back up to 230 volt and get that voltage, correct at the motor. Because as the voltage gets lower, the amperage goes up, and then when it runs off a nameplate, the amperage is a direct relation to heat, which could cause the motor to burn up. So we try to keep the voltage within 10% of the design of the motor, or what the manufacturer recommends or requires.
Now, I know in the rental fleet there that you've got kind of a mixture of different electric submersible pumps, and also that you've been a long time Thompson pump distributor, so you have a lot of Thompson diesel pumps in your fleet. But one of the lines that you've got some in terms of rental pumps is ABS. And then I know that you all have a lot of expertise in repairing ABS. Can you tell us a bit about ABS and where the strong suits have been for you in the rental market?
Yeah, with ABS pumps, they are pretty much a direct competitor to Flygt. Their curves match pretty similar in a lot of their pumps, from 2 horsepower to 100 horsepower in their dewatering line. Both manufacturers kind of shine with higher volumes, low heads, high volumes. If you were going to pump, let's say, a bridge pier out or something, and you wanted to move a tremendous amount of water out of there, I mean, we have pumps that would actually do like 5,000 gallons a minute at, 40 feet ahead, that are electric. Electric pumps are a real advantage a lot of times over a diesel like an ABS because, with a diesel, it's against the laws of physics really to draw the water up. But you're not really drawing up. You're creating a vacuum in a diesel pump, and it can only draw it up the atmospheric pressure pushes it up the hose, and it can only do that at about 28 feet at sea level. If you were to have a hole that you were trying to dewater, and it was deeper than, let's say 20, 25 feet, you would want to choose a submersible pump over a diesel pump, unless you can get that diesel pump down in the hole somehow. And that's never a good idea because, you run the risk of flooding. That's where you would use, an ABS pump, for example.
And then with Surumi, I know that you've been successful both in the rental fleet and selling the Surumi line. And what do you see as the primary strengths of Surumi for rental applications?
Surumi's a Japanese pump. They're really high quality. We've been with them for years and years. They really shine in high head applications. They don't do, a tremendous amount of volume for like all their LH line and that, but they make them up to about 150 horsepower. They can get up like over 600 feet ahead with their pumps. And the thing that's kind of unique about Surumi, not only can they do those higher heads, but their seal system. Most manufacturers, all the other manufacturers that I know of, underneath the impeller or above the impeller is the lower seal, and then above that lower seal, and then above that is an oil reservoir, then an upper seal. Well, the bottom line is when you're pumping that pressure, if you're pumping 230 feet up, and there's 230 feet ahead of that pump, well, you're seeing 100 pounds of pressure at that seal with most all the manufacturers. With Surumi's pump, they have a seal the same way but they have an opening to the outside of the pump, and they put a labyrinth ring between the lower seal and the impeller, and they have ports that go to the outside of the pump. So the lower seal of the pump only sees the pressure of the depth of the water that the pump is sitting in. So if it's in, a couple feet of water, well, it's only got 1 pound of pressure on it. And then that water that's building that high pressure, that labyrinth ring lets that escape through past that labyrinth ring, and it lets it go out those ports to the outside. And it always leaks a little water, maybe 5 gallons a minute or something past it. The beauty of it is that the lower seal of the pump never sees that high pressure. Hence, the pump lasts a lot longer because it does not get pressure trying to squeeze in between the seal and get into the motor. And that's 90% of these failures of these pumps are because water gets in the motor.
And then tell us about your relationship with Homa and the types of applications that you have been successful with Homa.
Homa, we do mostly for wastewater and for leachate. They have a line of grinder pumps. They have a line of open channel pumps, vortex pumps, submersible. They're a big player. They're as large as Flygt, as far as their capabilities anyway. And they got dealerships all over the states, all over the world, mostly for sewage and leachate. And we're using them all the time in, permanent applications where municipalities have a lift station that pumps, from a low-lying area up over a hill and then maybe gravity it to the treatment plant, or or even in the treatment plant where use it in processing, whatever, but they can handle large solids. They got pumps that will do a 5-inch solid. They're the choice for sewage type applications or leachate. They make different coatings for the pumps that we can put on the pumps that will hold up to off pHs, and they can actually harden impellers. They nitrate hard impellers. They do a lot, like for sand abrasion, like if they had a pump station that was taking storm water in near a road and it was getting a lot of salt in it or sand, that would help discourage the abrasion to the impeller. So they can do all types of things. Homa is more of a sewage line and more of a permanent installation. They do make them, you can buy them with a stand on them so you could use them as a portable pump, and you could put a manual control on it and use it that way. But most of the ones that we sell as a permanent application with a permanent control panel, that type of thing, those panels that would be outside, a NEMA 4X type enclosure, something we do quite regularly.
And you mentioned Flygt earlier, a few Flygt pumps in the rental fleet, and then you also have a large inventory of Flygt parts and do a lot of Flygt repairs. Could you tell us about the Flygt pumps in the rental fleet and then also just the service business in general? Because I see that as really, a core strength of the company is and why you are so popular in the region for repairs is there's a lot of competency around decades of different models of pumps with different manufacturers.
If you take your car somewhere and if you buy a car and you can't get it fixed somewhere, well, you're not going to probably go back to that guy to get your car fixed. You're going to go to the guy that can fix your car to buy your next car. So it's the same thing with the pumps. It's like if you're fixing the stuff and you can take care of the customer or something goes wrong, it's just customer service. A lot of these rental pumps over the years, we've acquired a different manufacturer or this or that. And it was something that we didn't have something that fit that particular area or didn't have that curve or whatever. We may take another pump, like a Flygt pump or some other manufacturer, and we would rebuild a pump and we'd put them in a rental fleet. They generate income. You've got the pump that can do the job. And when you come right down to it, it's all about servicing the customer. It's what he needs at the time and giving him what he needs to keep him coming back to you. And, it's like the one-stop pump shop type thing. It's like, if you need a diesel pump, we got that. If you need an electric pump, we got that. If you need it for wastewater, we have that. I think it's what you have to do today to draw everybody in, or the majority of them in.
And then you have quite a few generators of different sizes in the rental fleet. Oftentimes you're able to rent electric submersible and the customer has a readily available source of power and you can just plug into that. Other times there is no electric power available, so you have to provide a generator in combination with the electric submersible pump. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, normally we're not doing it as a standby, but sometimes that occurs. We don't rent any transfer switches, so to speak, but we may rent. A lot of times they want to pump somewhere and they don't have power available. A generator will go out and they'll put maybe 1, 2, 3 pumps on it or whatever. And if they really got to have backup, they may have a separate generator and pump. Our pumping arrangements, or our generator arrangements, I should say, we really have the generators to complement the pumps. In other words, we're in the pump business. I'm not really looking to go rent a pump or rent a generator, on some job site because they need to run an air compressor or something. The idea is so that we can always put a rental pump out, to complement the rental pump. So, you may have an application where you're deep and you can't get a diesel pump in there. And then we can put an electric pump in, but we don't have power to run it, so we give him a generator to do so. Another facet of servicing the customer, giving him what he needs to do the right thing to do the right job.
Listeners might be interested in, with electric submersible pumps, you can run them in parallel or you can run them in series. And what's the difference and what do you most often do?
We're doing a rental. The big thing there with it is that you get redundancy. In other words, if a pump fails, you have another pump can take over and you're still using the same pipeline, or, you could run multiple pumps together to adjust your flow or give you the desired flow. That's pretty common. Most duplex pump stations, which is a real common thing, there's two pumps. They'll pump into one pipeline. They'll pump out of the wet well to a valve box, then go to one line, and they'll be pumping parallel. If they got both pumps running, then they go up the line and they're pumping. Now, when you do that, you guys got to remember if you're calculating stuff up to do it that way, the pump's not going to pump double if you pump two pumps into the same pipe. The friction loss becomes greater, and you have to calculate for that, the flow is going to be less out of each pump, but the friction loss stays the same with the double flow. So really what ends up happening is that when you look at putting one pump on versus two, say you're doing 100 gallons a minute with one pump, you're not going to get 200 with two pumps. You're going to get something like 175, for example, because the friction loss goes up in the pipeline and causes, to be able to only do that 175 gallons a minute instead of the 200. That's just something that people want to be aware of, sizing stuff up.
Is there anything else that comes to mind that you'd like to pass on to listeners?
The only thing I could say, if you're taking a call for a rental or for whatever, for an application, you're best off listen to what the customer has to say, really understand what he has to say, because a lot of times they don't always give you the information when they want to rent a pump or they want to size something up. They're asking you to do, and they just say, I want a 4-inch pump. Well, you got to ask the questions. How much head? How many gallons per minute do you want? What voltage do you have? How long is the cable? Do you need a control box on it? Do you need, what voltage do you have there? You ask all these questions, and everybody should have their own list, if they don't know it by heart, that when a customer calls, write these things down, because it's so easy to get in trouble. You send something 100 miles away and it's the wrong thing, and it's like, well, that's not really a good thing. That costs you money. And the customer will appreciate that in the long run, because, every time he gets a pump, if he said he wanted a 4-inch pump, and I've seen guys take a 4-inch pump, for example, and I'd say, well, I got to know exactly what it's doing. And they'd say, oh, geez, your 4-inch pump's the best pump. I says, the only reason that's the best pump is because we looked at it and we gave you a 4-inch pump that gave you the maximum gallons per minute at that head. And they think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. So, it's really important to get the proper information when you size these things up or take a rental.
I want to thank you for your input today. Tom, a happy retirement. I thank you for your time today, and maybe you can come back in the future and we can talk to you again.